report out of Newark Daily News a few months ago where they have over 250 things stolen by the TSA every week at JFK. I myself had a gift to one of my daughters when this is about 7 years ago. She was only a few months old. A rattle teething ring stolen. They unpacked the little package from Tiffany's and stole it. So when you say 50 things that you chronicle, that is literally the tip of the iceberg.
Well, you're exactly right. And what we did was just get into 50 of the crimes. And we were astounded with what we found. And you know what is so interesting is since we did that report and made it public and filed our legislation, which is called the STRIP Act, Stop TSA's Reach-In Policy. And since we did that, we are hearing from people all over the country about issues and problems and the TSA not following up with them. Some of the things are appalling, and the manner and the way in which they are treating some of our citizens is absolutely appalling, completely uncalled for. So, you know, we're continuing to push through on our legislation. I think we're up over 150 co-sponsors on it now. We have bipartisan agreement and support in Congress that something needs to be done to rein in the TSA. And, you know, one of the things we found that seems to exacerbate the issue with their overreaching their authority is this. They now have unionized these TSA so-called officers. And you've got 46,000 TSA officers, if you will, who are just to be airport security screeners. Bear in mind, not a lot of due diligence done on their hiring. Washington Reagan Airport, they advertise at discount gas stations in the area and on top of pizza boxes.
No, I know. Let me just stop you for a moment, Congresswoman, because obviously you're spearheading this, and we want to commend you. The bill is H.R. 3608, and in the time we've got left, I want you to be able to cover other areas of this fight and how we get behind you to try to restore this big area of the Constitution that's being violated. But what about the mission creep, more like mission gallop, where right here where I live in Texas, I'm in Austin, but in Dallas, I told people this like a year ago, they didn't believe it. It's finally in the newspaper. I had family that saw it. But now in Houston, they set up warrantless checkpoints on highways and roads, bus stations, train terminals, and they go on buses and they pull cars over. Well, you know, in Tennessee 2 years ago, TSA, quote, inspectors, the Viper teams were out there, and they were commanding a military and local police and the state police with highway checkpoints. So it's happened in your state. What about that? I mean, what about jurisdiction? Even if they were federal officers, since when are they running around out of their jurisdiction? So you got fake officers out of their jurisdiction.
That's right. See, TSA officers have no authority to arrest anybody. If they have a problem at all, they have to do what you and I do and call the police. And what we have seen, these are called Viper teams that you're referencing, VIPR. They're the Intermodal Preparedness Response Team. Now, these teams, as you said, have been on our highways. What we are trying to do is to return them to the airport to assist the traveling public as they go through the airport. The STRIP Act does that because let me tell you something. There is no business. The TSA has no business being on our city buses, our subways, our trains, our highways. And, you know, when the FBI or the CIA gets a tip and they're going to go about trying to stop terrorist attack or to interdict some kind of situation, they are working on actionable intelligence. The TSA just does their searches randomly. They can pull over anybody. They can stop anybody. They can randomly search anybody.
Because they say so, just like they made themselves, just like they made themselves officers. I mean, Congress had to create the FBI. They had to go through an approval process. The states had to be created. They have constitutions. Under city and county charters, they're able, under the law, to hire people that are trained in the Constitution, due process bonded. And then now they just announce themselves God. Look, the only reason I raise this parallel, and I know there's some good people that work there, but that's like saying there's some good people in Nazi Germany. Hitler just created the brown shirts as well. Stalin did the same thing. All authoritarian systems seek to create a new type of goon force outside of the original military and police training system. And that's exactly what I see, Congresswoman, happening here.
Well, it has been of such concern to us. And that is why we continue to go after it. The TSA has no business doing anything but working as airport security screeners in our nation's airport and assisting the traveling public in that regard. And our goal is to get them out of these uniforms, to get them out of these shirts, to get them out of these badges, and to return them to doing that simple task of assistance. We are incredibly concerned with this overreach and this mission creep and the unionization and a lack of regard for the traveling public. And, you know, we just, it's time to put a halt to it. My legislation is the very first step in getting that done.
Yes, ma'am. We've only got about 8 minutes left with you. Again, been gracious to give us this much time. We just want to commend you. We know Tennessee is proud to have somebody up there that'll actually stand up for the Bill of Rights and Constitution. That is such a rarity these days. I mean, think of how far the TSA has already, gone. Now I'm sure you know that first they were like, we're going to make dock workers go through us to get a job. And then now we're going to make, I'm sure you saw in New Mexico last year, a judge ruled the TSA had to train the public schools on their security. So it's okay if they come train you. Now you can violate people's rights and put your hand down somebody's pants. William Shatner had his pants pulled down last week. I am afraid to fly with my wife and children just because my daughters and my son have been taught, don't let somebody touch you. And they've had top psychologists come out and say, this is training children so that people like Jerry Sandusky can have their way with them. I mean, how do I teach my children stranger danger, don't let somebody touch you, but now accept these people?
Well, this is one of the reasons we want to put a stop to this. The TSA, bear in mind, the TSA has not captured one terrorist. They have not led to the arrest or capture of one terrorist. And this overreach, all of these machinations that they're going through at the airport, this is also uncalled for. So, we do appreciate the help of people who are going to work with us to get this reined back in. It is, it's just something that we've got to do. It's a step we've got to take before this gets any further out of control.
You're right. I want to get into the lying here because you're up on all of this, but for some of the new listeners, they said 3 years ago, we're not groping children, even though we had hundreds of videos of them even pulling children's pants off and their shirts off, 2-3-year-olds taking babies' diapers off. Then it happened to one of my employees. The Drudge Report linked to it, and it ended up being a national story that became the biggest story in the country for about 3 months. As the TSA started saying, we don't do that, then they said, well, now we're going to stop under 12. Courthouses were doing it in Colorado and Florida until people pointed out it was illegal to do that to under 18-year-olds, so they had to stop. They also had the naked body scanners going in that it's been shown violate federal law here, but also in England. So it's all part of this lawless power grab. But then this year, they were stripping down women, 85, 90-year-old, 95-year-old women, taking them behind closed doors, making old people get out of wheelchairs that can't even walk, making other people help them, screaming at old people. Happened to my grandmother, who's almost 90, flying back from a wedding, screaming at her to move quicker, on crutches. I mean, it's like our induction into a prison or something, a slave training. But what about holding them accountable for the $40 billion that they estimate we lose a year in tourism. The State Department's having to run TV ads in Europe saying, come here, we're not a police state. Well, yes, we are. I mean, I'm ranting here, basically throwing ourselves, on the mercy of Congress. But what about the lying? What about the culture of saying we don't strip search old ladies and then being caught, or we don't strip search children, or there's no radiation from the scanners and they get caught lying? How did the culture of this get so villainous?
I wish I had an answer for you, and I don't know. But I had a constituent yesterday that I thought summed it up pretty well. I was doing a listening session, and they came up to me after it was over, and they said, Marsha, I just got to tell you, they said, I feel like we're looking at a time when it is government run amok, when it is government run wild. And they talked about the TSA videos and these judicial conferences that are in elaborate locations. And they said, I just want to see some government restraint. And another constituent had said, when is Congress going to put some mandates on these bureaucracies and agencies and require them to comply with the law and to act in a responsible manner under the law? And I thought, that's a pretty good question, and it's a pretty good way of summing it up. And I think it is distressing to individuals to see their government and employees of the federal government conduct themselves in the manner that some, not all, but some of these TSA agents who probably, if a thorough background check were done, would not have been hired in the first place. I think it is just so demeaning to individuals to be treated in such a disrespectful manner by some of the TSA agents who raise their voices, who bark out orders, who act as if they're the authority because they're wearing a uniform and a badge. And with my children and grandchildren, I want them to understand that when someone has worked hard and wears a uniform, whether it's one of our men and women in military, whether it's a policeman, a fireman, a highway patrolman, that I want them to show appropriate respect for that individual. And it's, when they are treated so disrespectfully by a TSA agent who should not be wearing that uniform in the first place, it gets to be pretty difficult to make that argument. So we're just going to keep plugging away at trying to move this legislation forward, build support for it on a bipartisan basis, and hopefully be able to return them to working in the airports.
Yes, ma'am.
In a work shirt and trousers with a patch, and look at our traveling public and say, we are here to serve you. How may we assist?
Well, and there's more than one way to skin a cat. We need to support you and others, but there's also letters to the editor calling into talk radio to criticize it, keep the issue on the front burner. And in Houston, they had lawyers get involved and others and point out this is unconstitutional to have anybody randomly searching people, so they had to pull out of Houston.
You're exactly right. And look, what we've got here, I call it the network of you, Alex. And I want people to get on their email list and contact their friends and neighbors and say, this is a great bill. Contact their network. Get people energized.
Exactly. Don't just say, oh, thank goodness that Congresswoman Blackburn is up there, or there's Ron Paul or Alex Jones or somebody, or Rand Paul. We need everybody to do a little bit. Together, many hands make light work. Final question on another subject that just popped in my mind. What do you make of Attorney General Eric Holder in Fast and Furious and the fact that it's come out that they did perjure themselves and that they're now stopping protest against him in front of the White House? I mean, if he doesn't get in trouble for this, does this not really start discrediting the entire Justice Department who's now shielding him?
I think that with the contempt charges that we filed last week, both civilly and criminally, that it does point out that there are some serious problems with the Attorney General and with the conduct that has been exhibited through Fast and Furious. I think you're exactly right on that.
Are you, because you're up there, I know you voted for contempt, are you hearing any rumblings about bringing back what Congress had in the past and exercising the authority to clap him in irons?
We're going to let Chairman Issa, who has been handling this, proceed, and I understand that he